I'm sure you've heard the title. A poor girl dragged the cold CEO millionaire from the crash. His survival exposed the judge framing her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. Emily Davis had never imagined that a single night could change her life forever. She was a waitress at a small diner in a sleepy town in upstate New York, struggling to make ends meet. Working late hours wasn't easy, but Emily had always been determined to get by. Her life was simple, and she preferred it that way, until one fateful evening. It was raining heavily as she drove home, her car's headlights barely cutting through the dark, misty streets. Suddenly, a flash of light up ahead caught her attention. It was a car speeding down the road, swerving uncontrollably. The next moment, the vehicle crashed into a tree, and a loud screech filled the air. Emily's heart raced. Without thinking, she slammed her foot on the brakes, pulled over to the side, and jumped out of her car. She ran towards the wreckage, her heart pounding with fear and urgency. The driver was unconscious, his body slumped over the wheel. It didn't take long for Emily to realize this wasn't just any accident. The man was wearing a suit, a designer suit. He must have been someone important. But Emily didn't care about that. She just knew she had to help. She pried open the car door, her hands shaking as she pulled the unconscious man out. She dragged him away from the wreck, struggling to keep him conscious. The rain continued to pour, soaking them both, but Emily didn't stop. Her thoughts raced as she tried to figure out what to do next. Fortunately, a passing car stopped to help, and together they got the man to the nearest hospital. But even after all that, Emily still had no idea who he was. Later, as she sat nervously in the waiting room, she overheard a nurse mentioning his name, Ethan Blake. The name didn't mean anything to her at first, but when she looked up, she saw the shocked faces of some of the hospital staff. Ethan Blake wasn't just anyone. He was a billionaire, the cold and ruthless CEO of a massive corporation. His reputation was notorious, and people often whispered about his cutthroat ways in the business world. He wasn't someone Emily ever thought she'd meet, let alone save. But that was the reality now. Ethan Blake owed her his life, and the thought lingered in Emily's mind long after she left the hospital that night. Little did she know, this one act of kindness would lead her into a world she had never known, a world filled with power, danger, and a shocking revelation about a judge who had been manipulating everything behind the scenes. I had no idea what to expect after that night. The next few days were a blur. Emily went back to her routine, working long hours at the diner, barely making enough tips to cover rent and utilities. But something had changed inside her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the man she saved. Ethan Blake, the billionaire, the cold CEO. She had heard stories about him, but they never mentioned how deeply his icy demeanor ran. They just talked about his ruthless business tactics and his ability to crush anyone in his way. The thing was, she wasn't supposed to think about him. Not at all. She was just a small-town girl. But then, out of the blue, her phone rang one afternoon while she was cleaning tables. She hesitated before answering it. Hello. The voice on the other end was calm, controlled, and unmistakable. Emily Davis? Ethan's voice. It sent a shiver down her spine. Yes. She could barely get the word out. This is Ethan Blake. I wanted to thank you for what you did for me that night. Emily's heart raced. She wasn't sure what to say. You saved my life, he continued, his tone still cool but now with a hint of something softer. And I owe you. I'd like to repay you. She felt an uncomfortable twist in her stomach. You don't have to do that, Emily quickly responded. It was just the right thing to do. I didn't expect anything in return. Ethan's voice paused for a moment. Then he spoke again, more firm this time. I insist. I have a business proposal for you. Meet me tomorrow at my office. Emily swallowed hard. Business proposal? She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Ethan Blake didn't need her help. He was a billionaire, after all. But still, she agreed. The next morning, she found herself standing in front of a sleek, modern skyscraper in downtown New York. The building seemed to tower over her, the glass reflecting the sunlight in sharp angles. It was a stark contrast to her small-town life. She walked through the revolving doors, feeling completely out of place. The receptionist, with a perfect smile, led her to the elevator. The ride-up felt like an eternity. When the doors finally opened, Ethan Blake was waiting for her. He was dressed in an immaculate suit, his eyes sharp and calculating, just like the stories said. But there was something else in them, a hint of gratitude, maybe? He stood up from his desk as she entered. "Ms. Davis," he greeted her. "Thank you for coming." Emily offered a nervous smile. "Of course, Mr. Blake." Ethan gestured to the chair across from his desk. She sat down, still unsure of what was about to happen. "I've been thinking about how to repay you," Ethan began, leaning back in his chair. "And I believe I have a way." He paused for a moment, his gaze piercing. "I want to offer you a job." Emily blinked. "A job?" She wasn't sure if she'd heard him correctly. Ethan nodded. "Not just any job. I want you to come work for me, at my company. You'll be in charge of a special project. Something that could change everything for you." Emily wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. She had no experience in business. What could someone like her possibly bring to his company? But before she could say anything, Ethan continued, "It's not about your qualifications. It's about your character. You prove to me that you're not like the others. And I need someone who understands people, who isn't afraid to stand up for what's right." Emily was stunned. "You want me to work for you?" she repeated, barely believing it. Ethan smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes. And in return, I'll make sure your life is never the same again. Whatever you need, money, protection, a new start, I'll give it to you. You saved me. Let me save you." Emily sat there, her mind racing. This was crazy, but she couldn't deny the temptation of the offer. She'd never been given a chance like this before. The question was, what did Ethan Blake really want from her? And why was he offering her such a life-changing opportunity? "I know what you must be thinking." Emily Davis, a small-town girl, working for one of the richest and most powerful men in the world. It sounded crazy to her too. As she sat in the luxurious office of Ethan Blake, her mind was racing. She had always lived a simple life, doing her best to get by, working long hours at the diner, never expecting anything more. But now, in front of her, was a reality she couldn't have imagined. Ethan had offered her a job, a chance to work with him, a chance to change everything. The words hung in the air, heavy with promise. "You'll be in charge of a special project," he had said. Emily tried to process it. A special project? What could a man like Ethan Blake want with someone like her? She was just a waitress with no business experience. But Ethan seemed serious, his gaze unwavering. It was as if he could see right through her. "I know this is unexpected," Ethan continued, breaking the silence. "But I believe you have the potential to do something great. And I need someone with your perspective." Emily stared at him, still unsure. Was this some kind of test? Or maybe he was just looking for a way to repay her, to make up for the debt he felt. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this," Emily finally said. "I've never done anything like this before. I don't have any experience in business, or," she hesitated, "or any qualifications." Ethan smiled, but there was something in his eyes, an intensity that made her feel both nervous and oddly reassured at the same time. "That's exactly why I want you. I'm not looking for someone who's already been molded by the corporate world. I need someone who thinks differently, who sees things that others don't." His words hit her like a wave. It was hard to imagine herself in a world so far removed from her own. But she also couldn't ignore the opportunity before her. What if this was the break she had been waiting for her entire life? What if she could make a real difference? "I'll think about it," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Take your time. But know this, you'll never get another offer like this. I'll give you everything you need. Money, resources, and the freedom to pursue the project however you see fit. All you have to do is say yes." The offer sounded too good to be true. And yet, there was something about it that made her hesitate. What did he want from her? What was the catch? She had heard stories about Ethan Blake, how ruthless he was, how cold and calculated. She didn't want to get caught in a world of power games, manipulations, and secrets. But then again, what did she have to lose? Emily spent the next few days trying to wrap her head around the offer. She didn't know much about business or what kind of project Ethan had in mind. But she did know that her life had always been one of struggle and uncertainty. This could be her chance to change that. On the third day after their meeting, Emily returned to Ethan's office. She had made up her mind. She was going to say yes. As she entered the building again, she felt a sense of nervous excitement wash over her. This was it. Her life was about to take a dramatic turn. The receptionist smiled as she led Emily to the elevator, and for the second time, she ascended to Ethan's office. When the elevator doors opened, Ethan was already waiting for her. This time, he didn't stand up. He just motioned for her to sit. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "I knew you would." Emily didn't know what to say. She just nodded, still processing everything. "So," Ethan continued, "let's get to work. You're going to help me with something important." Emily took a deep breath. She had no idea what she was getting into, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was ready for something more. She didn't know what Ethan had planned, but she was about to find out. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything she knew about trust, power, and the truth. Ethan's world was far more dangerous than she ever imagined, and Emily was about to be caught in the middle of it all. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. After agreeing to Ethan Blake's offer, everything felt like a whirlwind. Over the next few weeks, I found myself submerged in his world, a world far beyond anything I had ever known. The luxury, the power, the cold, calculated decisions, none of it made sense to me. But there I was, working alongside the man who had once been a stranger, now offering me opportunities one couldn't have dreamed of. The project he had put me in charge of was unlike anything I could have imagined. It wasn't a small task, it was huge. Ethan wanted me to help him restructure his company's outreach program, a program that had the potential to change the way the public viewed his corporation. He wanted me to bring a human touch to a business that had built its empire on impersonal, bottom-line decisions. At first, I didn't understand what he saw in me. I didn't have any corporate experience, let alone a background in business development. I had no idea how to deal with stakeholders, investments, or corporate negotiations. But Ethan didn't care about that. He saw something in me, something that was hard to define. Every morning, I would walk into his office, trying to look confident, trying to fit into a world that didn't feel like it belonged to me. Ethan would be there, sitting behind his massive desk, his eyes always focused, always calculating. "Emily," he would say, "I need you to think bigger. I know you can do it." His confidence in me was overwhelming, and for some reason, it made me want to prove him right. Slowly but surely, I started making progress. I began meeting with different departments, gathering input, and brainstorming ideas for the outreach project. The more I learned about the company, the more I realized how complex and dangerous the world I had stepped into truly was. Ethan's business empire wasn't just about money. It was about control. Every decision he made, every move he took, had a ripple effect on the people around him. But it wasn't just the business that was complicated. Ethan himself was a puzzle, one I couldn't quite figure out. There were moments when he was kind and thoughtful, and others when he was distant and cold. I began to wonder if he had a hidden agenda, if there was something more to his offer than just gratitude. But despite my suspicions, I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward him. Something about his presence, his power, and the way he looked at me made me feel like I was standing at the edge of something huge. One evening, after another long day of meetings and late-night brainstorming, I stayed in the office to finish some work. Ethan had left for the day, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As I sat at my desk, I overheard voices coming from the hallway. I froze. It wasn't uncommon for employees to stay late, but this time the voices sounded more urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized Ethan's voice among the hushed tones. My curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly moved toward the door. I cracked it open just enough to peek through. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. Ethan was speaking to a man I had never seen before, someone dressed in a dark suit with a cold, calculating expression. I couldn't hear their conversation, but the tension in the air was palpable. I quickly pulled back from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Who was that man? And why was Ethan speaking to him in such a secretive manner? My mind raced with possibilities. I had only scratched the surface of Ethan's world, but I could already tell there were layers to him that I didn't understand. It was clear that there were things going on behind the scenes, things that I wasn't meant to know. But the more I saw, the more I realized that I was getting deeper into something dangerous, something I might not be able to get out of. My role in the company was supposed to be straightforward, just a simple project. But now, With every passing day, I couldn't help but feel that I was becoming entangled in a web far more complex than I had ever imagined. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had overheard. Ethan's secretive conversation with the mysterious man kept replaying in my mind. Every time I tried to focus on my work, I found myself distracted, wondering who that man was and what kind of business they were discussing behind closed doors. As the days went by, I began to feel a shift in the air, an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't ignore. Ethan was still the same in many ways, calm, collected, and distant. But there was something different now. I could sense it in the way he watched me sometimes, as if he were waiting for me to uncover something. Or maybe he was just waiting for me to slip up. But what? Why was I feeling so paranoid? Was I just imagining things? The project he had given me was moving forward, but it didn't feel like enough. I was starting to feel like there was something more, something much bigger, happening just beneath the surface. It was only a few days later when the truth began to surface. Ethan had called me into his office again, his expression as unreadable as ever. "Emily," he said, his voice smooth as ever. "I need you to accompany me to a meeting tomorrow." The words hung in the air, and I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. A meeting? With whom? Ethan didn't seem like the kind of man who would share his personal business with anyone, especially not with someone like me. "What kind of meeting?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "A business meeting," Ethan replied. His gaze held mine for a moment longer than usual, as though weighing my reaction. "It's important, and I need you to be there." I nodded, still unsure of what I was getting myself into. The next day, I found myself sitting in the back of a sleek black car, heading toward a location I had never seen before. The drive was quiet, the city passing by in a blur as I tried to calm my racing thoughts. Ethan sat next to me, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. I tried to read his expression, but it was like staring at a wall. He didn't give anything away. We finally arrived at a private building that was far more secure than anything I had seen before. There were guards at the entrance, and the atmosphere felt charged with secrecy. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as we stepped out of the car and walked toward the building. Inside, the atmosphere was just as tense. The air felt thick with anticipation, and the people we passed didn't look at us directly. They were all dressed in business suits, their eyes avoiding ours as if they knew something we didn't. Ethan led me through the building, past hallways lined with polished marble and glass. I tried to take in the details, but it all felt surreal, like I was stepping into a world I didn't belong in. Finally, we reached a large conference room. There were several people already seated around a massive table, but the moment we entered, all eyes turned toward us. Ethan didn't flinch. He walked to the head of the table and took his seat, motioning for me to sit next to him. I hesitated for just a moment before following his lead. As I sat down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. These weren't just ordinary business people. There was something cold, calculating, about the way they looked at each other. It felt like I was intruding on a world that had no place for someone like me. Ethan spoke first, his voice steady and commanding. "Gentlemen," he began, "this is Emily Davis. She will be overseeing the project I mentioned to you." The room fell silent. Everyone's eyes shifted to me, and I suddenly felt very small. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to be involved in these decisions. But Ethan's gaze remained unwavering, and I couldn't bring myself to look away. "Emily," Ethan continued, "I trust you're ready for this challenge." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I was. "Yes, Mr. Blake," I managed to say. I had no idea what I was getting into, but there was no turning back now. The meeting went on, but I found it hard to focus on the conversation. My mind kept wandering back to the man in the hallway, the one I had overheard talking to Ethan. Who was he? And why was he part of all this? What was Ethan really involved in? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I knew about the man I was working for. I had thought Ethan's world was just about business, but now I was starting to understand that there was something far more dangerous at play, something that was slowly drawing me in, something I couldn't escape from. I didn't sleep much that night. The images from the meeting kept swirling in my mind. Ethan Blake had introduced me to a world that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I had thought I was just getting involved in a simple project, but it was clear now that I had stepped into something much darker, something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. As the days passed, my unease grew. The people in the conference room, the ones Ethan had introduced me to, were not just businessmen and women. They were all carefully selected, each with their own role in whatever this was. I could sense the power in the room, the tension that pulsed beneath their calm exteriors. Every word they spoke, every decision they made, felt like it had far-reaching consequences. I tried to focus on my work, but the questions kept piling up. What was Ethan really doing? What kind of empire was he building? And why was I so deeply involved now? It wasn't just the business that was unsettling. It was Ethan himself. I had started to see glimpses of the man behind the cold, calculating CEO. There were moments when he would look at me, not with the distant, professional gaze I had gotten used to, but with something else, a kind of intensity that I couldn't quite place. It made me wonder if he was testing me, if he was waiting for me to figure something out. I couldn't deny that a part of me was drawn to him. There was something magnetic about Ethan, something that made me want to understand him, to get closer to the truth. But every time I thought I was starting to understand, he would pull away again, locking himself behind the walls he had built. A few nights later, I found myself standing in front of his office again, unable to shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. I had been working late again, trying to wrap my head around the project I was overseeing, when I noticed something unusual. The door to Ethan's office was slightly ajar. I hadn't seen him around all evening, and I figured he had gone home. But something about the open door felt off. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over and gently pushed it open. Inside, the office was dark except for the soft glow of the desk lamp. Ethan was sitting at his desk, papers spread out in front of him, but it was the expression on his face that caught me off guard. He wasn't looking at the papers. He was staring at the wall, his jaw clenched, as if he were lost in thought, or perhaps even frustration. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should interrupt. But before I could decide, Ethan looked up. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something in them that wasn't so cold. There was a flicker of something deeper. "Emily," he said, his voice low but not unfriendly. "What are you doing here so late?" I stepped into the room, unsure of how to respond. "I was just finishing some work," I said, trying to sound casual. I didn't mean to intrude. Ethan nodded, but his eyes never left mine. "It's fine. Come sit." I hesitated, but then I walked over to the chair in front of his desk and sat down. There was a heavy silence between us. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his fingers tapping on the desk. I waited, unsure of what to say. Finally, he spoke again. "You know, you're starting to get under my skin, Emily," he said, his voice almost a whisper. My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't tell if I was shocked, confused, or something else entirely. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze still intense. "I've been watching you," he said. "You're different from the others. You don't just do what you're told. You think for yourself. You question things." His words sent a chill down my spine. Was that a compliment or a warning? I wasn't sure. "Is that a bad thing?" I asked, feeling a little defensive. Ethan's lips curled into a small, almost amused smile. "No," he said. "It's not. But it makes things complicated." I didn't understand what he meant by that, but before I could ask, he stood up and walked over to the window. "There are things happening, Emily," he said, his back to me. "Things you don't fully understand yet. But I'm going to need you to trust me." I couldn't tell if he was being honest, or if this was just another one of his manipulative games. "Trust you?" I asked, my voice shaky. Ethan turned around slowly, his gaze piercing. "Yes, because what I'm about to tell you could change everything." My heart raced as I waited for him to speak. But instead, he just looked at me for a long moment. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that whatever was coming next would be the beginning of something that could change my life forever. I could feel the weight of Ethan's words in the air, heavy with anticipation and mystery. He stood there, looking out of the window, his silhouette sharp against the dimming sky. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Trust him? What did that even mean in a world where nothing felt stable? Where everything about this place, this life, was unpredictable and new. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice betraying my nerves. Ethan didn't answer right away. He kept his gaze fixed outside, his posture tense, as if he were gathering his thoughts. Finally, he turned around to face me. His expression had shifted, and the usual coolness was replaced with something else. Something unreadable. "I'm not just offering you a job, Emily," he said, his voice low. "I'm offering you a chance to be part of something bigger. But it's not something you can walk away from once you step in. My heart raced as I tried to process what he was saying. What do you mean by bigger? I asked cautiously, not sure I was ready for the answer. Ethan's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, it felt as if the world outside had disappeared. I mean power, he said, his voice steady and confident. Influence. Control. Things that go beyond what you see on the surface. This company, this empire, isn't just about business. It's about shaping the world around us. I took a step back, instinctively pulling away, but he held my gaze, his expression unyielding. That's a lot to take in, I said, my mind spinning. I don't think I'm ready for something like that. Ethan took a step closer, his presence imposing yet strangely calming. I didn't say you had to be ready, but you're here now, and you've seen enough to know that there's more going on here than just a simple project. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized just how true that was. The meetings, the people, the secretive atmosphere. It all pointed to something far more complicated than I had ever imagined. You've been in this world for less than a month, Emily. Ethan continued, his voice now softer, almost inviting. But you're already involved. You're already in the middle of it. And whether you like it or not, you're going to have to choose which side you're on. My breath caught in my throat. What do you mean, which side? I asked, my voice trembling. Ethan's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. There are people who want to see me fall. There are people who want to take what's mine. But I don't let that happen. I'm always 3 steps ahead. I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of it all. And where do I fit into this? I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. Ethan paused for a moment, his gaze still unwavering. You fit in because you have something others don't, he said, his tone almost approving. You have the ability to see things differently. You're not like the others. And that's why I trust you. The words hit me like a jolt of electricity, and I wasn't sure if I was flattered or terrified. I didn't understand what he meant by trust, or why he had placed so much importance on me. But there was something about the way he spoke that made me believe he wasn't lying. There was a truth in his words, one that felt dangerous and powerful. But trust is a fragile thing, Ethan said, breaking the silence, his voice suddenly serious. And in my world, trust is something you earn. And once it's broken, it's gone forever. My stomach twisted at the thought. I didn't want to be part of a world where trust could be so easily shattered, where people were only valued for what they could offer. But deep down, I knew that I was already too far in. I had already seen too much, learned too much. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there was no turning back. The decision had already been made for me. Ethan was right about one thing. I was already part of this world. And now, there was no way out. The next few days were a blur. I dove into the project Ethan had assigned me, my mind preoccupied with the idea of what he had told me. I kept my distance from him during the day, but every night, his words echoed in my mind. Choose which side you're on. What side was there to choose? I didn't have the answers yet, but something inside me told me that sooner or later, I was going to have to make a choice. And that choice would shape my future, for better or worse. I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I first agreed to help Ethan. But now, standing at the edge of this vast, dangerous world, I couldn't imagine walking away. Days had blurred into one another, filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and long hours that seemed to stretch endlessly. But the deeper I got, the more questions I had, and the more the sense of foreboding grew. Ethan had been right about one thing. Once you were involved, there was no easy way out. The people I worked with, people who were nothing like the employees in the diner I used to work at, weren't just colleagues. They were soldiers in a much larger game, and I was learning to play by their rules. But the more I saw, the more I realized I was just a pawn in this game. Ethan continued to trust me with bigger responsibilities, and each time he did, it was both a gift and a burden. I began to notice how everything in his world was calculated. Every decision was made with a purpose, every word carefully chosen, every gesture deliberate. I started to see the threads that connected everything, but they were tangled, and I wasn't sure I had the skill to untangle them. I had learned that Ethan's company was not just a business. It was a network, an empire built on influence, power, and secrets. And I was in the middle of it. There were meetings with shady figures, discussions about deals that I didn't fully understand, and whispers of people who wanted Ethan's position. But as much as I tried to stay focused on the work, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was being watched. Every move I made felt scrutinized. Every time I thought I had a grasp on the situation, a new layer of complexity was added. And through it all, there was Ethan, seemingly untouched by the chaos around him. Always calm, always in control. I was starting to wonder if there was a side to him that no one had ever seen. He kept pushing me, telling me to think bigger, to trust my instincts, to embrace the power that came with the role he had given me. "You're stronger than you realize, Emily," he would say. "You're part of something bigger now. Don't doubt yourself." But as the days went on, I began to doubt everything. I found myself growing more distant from the world I once knew. The diner, my old friends, my simple life, it all seemed so far away. Ethan's world had become my world, and the more I got wrapped up in it, the more I realized how much was at stake. One evening, after another exhausting day, I was sitting at my desk, staring at my computer screen, when I noticed an email pop up in my inbox. It was from an anonymous sender. The subject line read, "You don't know who you're working for." My heart skipped a beat. I opened the message, but all it contained was a single sentence. "He's not who you think he is." The message sent a chill through me, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. What did it mean? Who had sent it? And what was it trying to tell me? I thought about Ethan, his confidence, his coldness, his ambition. I thought about the secret of meetings, the power plays, and the way people around him seemed to either fear or revere him. What if I had gotten it all wrong? What if the man I had been working for, the man I had started to trust, wasn't the person I thought he was? The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Ethan had asked me to meet him for a private discussion about the progress of my project. I arrived at his office, my mind racing with questions. As soon as I stepped inside, Ethan closed the door behind me, his usual calm demeanor firmly in place. "Emily," he said, his voice low, "I need you to be ready for what comes next." My heart began to pound in my chest. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound composed. Ethan walked over to the window, his back to me. "There are things happening that I can't control," he said quietly. "There are people who want to take everything I've built, but I'm not going down without a fight." I didn't know if he was talking about the business or something more personal. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan turned around, his eyes intense. "I want you to keep your eyes open. Trust no one, not even me." His words hit me like a punch in the gut. Trust no one, not even him. I had trusted Ethan more than anyone else in this world, and now he was telling me to doubt everything. "What's going on?" I asked, the fear creeping into my voice. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked back to his desk, his hand resting on the edge. "You'll understand soon enough," he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. "But for now, just know this, we're not safe. No one is." I felt a chill settle over me, a sense of dread that I couldn't shake. Whatever was coming, I knew I wasn't prepared for it. But there was no turning back now. I had chosen my side, and there was no way out. I left Ethan's office that day feeling more uncertain than ever. His words kept echoing in my mind. Trust no one. Not even me. How could I possibly trust no one, especially him? The man who had given me everything. The man who had pulled me from the ordinary into this world of power and secrets. But the fear in his eyes, the urgency in his voice, made it clear that something was deeply wrong. I couldn't ignore it. The next few days were a blur of meetings and phone calls, each one more mysterious than the last. Ethan's usual cool demeanor had turned into something more guarded. He was still present, still directing operations with precision, but there was a tension in the air, an invisible thread that stretched tighter with each passing day. I found myself questioning everything around me. Why was he acting this way? Was there really a threat, or was it just another layer of his strategy to keep everyone on edge? One evening, as I sat at my desk working late, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer. "Emily," a voice said, and my heart skipped. It was Ethan. "I need you to meet me. Alone. Tonight." I hesitated for a moment, glancing around the empty office. "Where?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll send you the address. Don't tell anyone. Trust no one." His voice was firm, urgent. Before I could respond, he hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment, unsure if I should follow through. Was this really just another part of his plan? Or was it something more? I didn't have the answers, but deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had already crossed a line, and there was no going back now. I quickly gathered my things and headed out. The city felt different at night. The streets that were usually full of life now seemed empty, darkened by an eerie quiet. When I arrived at the address Ethan had sent me, I realized I was standing in front of a building I didn't recognize. It was tucked away on a quiet side street, far from the usual business districts. The building looked abandoned, but the light coming from the top floor told me someone was inside. I hesitated for a moment before making my way inside. The air felt thick with the weight of something I couldn't place. I rode the elevator up to the top floor, my mind racing with possibilities. When the doors opened, I found myself in a large, empty room. Ethan was standing by the window, his back to me. He didn't turn when I entered, and I wondered if he had expected me to be late or if he was simply lost in his thoughts. "You came," he said, his voice cold, but I could hear the hint of something else beneath it. "I wasn't sure you would." "What's going on, Ethan?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why are we here?" Ethan turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "This is where it all began," he said. "Everything that's happening now, everything that's been set in motion, it started here. And it ends here too." I couldn't understand what he meant. "What are you talking about?" I pressed, stepping closer. Ethan walked toward me, his eyes never leaving mine. "I told you before, Emily. There are people who want to destroy everything I've built. But there's more. There are things you don't know, things I couldn't tell you before because I wasn't sure I could trust you." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What things?" I asked, my heart racing. "Things about the company. About the people I've worked with. About the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes." His words were cryptic, but they carried a weight that I couldn't ignore. "You need to be careful," Ethan said, his voice low and serious. "There's a conspiracy, and you're closer to it than you think. But you have to keep your distance, or you'll be dragged into something you won't be able to get out of." I stood there, frozen, trying to process what he was saying. Was this part of the game he was playing, or was it real? "But why tell me this now?" I asked, feeling the fear creep in. Ethan took a deep breath and looked at me, his gaze intense. "Because I trust you," he said quietly. "And because I need you. We're in this together now, Emily. Whether you like it or not." I didn't know how to respond. His words were both reassuring and terrifying at the same time. I was in too deep, and I knew it. But I also knew that if I walked away now, I might never understand the truth. And deep down, I wasn't ready to give up on the mystery that had consumed me. Ethan's world was dangerous, and I was already tangled in its web. There was no turning back. I stood there, in the dimly lit room, still processing everything Ethan had said. The air between us felt heavy, thick with unspoken words and unasked questions. His gaze held mine, as if searching for something I wasn't sure I even understood. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ethan took a long pause, his face unreadable. "Because you need to know, Emily," he replied, his tone softer but still firm. "You're more involved than you think. And when you're this deep, there's no going back." His words hung in the air, each syllable laced with an undeniable weight. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt dry. I had always known I was taking a risk by working with him, but I hadn't realized just how much of a risk. I didn't know what was more unsettling, the fact that I was already caught up in something so dangerous, or the way Ethan seemed so calm about it all. "So what happens now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the window again, his back to me. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't respond, but then he spoke, his voice quieter than before. "Now we prepare," he said. "There's more at stake here than just business, more than just power. There are lives on the line, Emily." A chill ran down my spine as I processed his words. "What are you talking about?" I asked, barely able to keep the panic out of my voice. Ethan turned to face me, his expression hardening once more. "There are forces out there that want to tear everything apart. People I've trusted, people I thought I could rely on. They've started to make moves against me, and it's only going to get worse from here." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "And you want me to help?" I asked, not sure what I was asking anymore. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to his desk and sat down, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the surface. "I don't want you involved, Emily. But you already are," he said. "You're too valuable to the people who want to take me down. They know your name. They know everything about you. And that's why I need you to be careful." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I was valuable. To whom? Who was Ethan really dealing with? Who were these people? I opened my mouth to ask, but Ethan was already speaking again. "You're going to have to trust me on this," he said, his eyes boring into mine. The choices you make from here on out, every step you take, every decision you make, they will change everything. For both of us. His words hung in the air, and I felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath my feet. How was I supposed to know what to do with all of this? I wasn't a part of his world. At least, I didn't think I was. And yet here I was, standing on the edge of something that seemed too big for me to comprehend. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching me closely. The thing is, Emily, you have a choice. You always have a choice. But once you make it, there's no turning back. His voice was low, almost coaxing, but there was a sharpness in his words that cut through the air. What choice? I asked, the words escaping before I could stop them. Ethan's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. To stay or to leave. To fight or to walk away. The truth is, I don't know if you're ready for what's coming. But I need you to decide. Now. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. What was the right thing to do? Stay with Ethan? Help him with whatever this was? Or walk away, cut ties, and go back to the life I once knew? But as I stood there, my mind racing with doubts and questions, something inside me told me I was already too far gone. Ethan was right. I had already made my choice. And now, there was no turning back. I left Ethan's office that night with a heavy heart. His words still echoed in my mind, repeating over and over, like a warning that had been set in motion long before I even understood what was at stake. Once you make your choice, there's no turning back. It felt like a game, one that had already been decided, and I was the pawn who had no idea where to move next. But deep down, I knew the choice wasn't as simple as he made it sound. It wasn't just about staying or leaving. It was about everything I had come to understand, and everything I was about to lose. The days that followed blurred together. I was still working on the project Ethan had assigned me, but my mind was no longer fully focused on it. I found myself constantly second-guessing my every move, wondering if it was the right one, wondering if I was playing into someone else's hands. The quiet conversations I overheard in the office, the glances that seemed to linger a little too long. Everything felt like a puzzle, and I wasn't sure if I was getting closer to solving it or just digging myself deeper into a hole. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the conference room going over reports, I felt a sudden sense of unease. It was as if someone was watching me. I looked up, scanning the room, but it was empty. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. I shook my head and tried to focus on the work in front of me, but my mind was spinning. That's when I received another anonymous message. The subject line was simple: "You're being watched." My stomach dropped. I opened the email quickly, but there was no new information, just the same ominous warning. They know everything. Who were these people? And why did they want me involved? Was I just another piece in Ethan's game? Or was there something more to this than I realized? As the days went on, I began to notice more strange things happening around me. Small, subtle changes, like people avoiding eye contact or talking in hushed tones when I entered the room. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. Something was happening, and it felt like the walls were closing in. Ethan had warned me that I wasn't safe, but I didn't realize how right he was. It wasn't until a late-night meeting that the full weight of it all hit me. Ethan had called me into his office once again, but this time, there was something different in the air. The usual calm, calculated aura he exuded was gone, replaced with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "We have a problem," he said, his voice low. "I didn't think it would happen this soon, but it's here. They've made their move." My heart skipped a beat. "Who?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. "The people who are after me," he replied, his eyes narrowing. "They've been watching us. They know everything we've done, and now they're ready to act." I swallowed hard, trying to process what he was saying. "What are we going to do?" Ethan walked over to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "There's nothing we can do. We wait." My mind raced. Wait. How could we just wait? "But they're going to," I started, but he cut me off, turning to face me. "I know," he said quietly, "but we can't make a move until we have all the information. We need to be sure." My hands trembled as I tried to comprehend what was happening. "How long do we have?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Not long," Ethan replied, his voice cold. "The clock is ticking, and every second we waste could cost us everything." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything I had yet to understand. I didn't know what Ethan had gotten himself into, or what I was really a part of, but one thing was clear. The danger was real, and it was closing in faster than either of us was prepared for. I had no choice but to stand by him. Whether I was ready for what was coming or not, I had already made my decision. There was no turning back now. The stakes were too high, and I was already too far in. I sat in Ethan's office, the weight of his words still pressing down on me. We wait. It felt impossible. Every fiber of my being wanted to do something, anything, to fight back against whatever forces were closing in on us. But Ethan's calm, controlled demeanor reminded me that he knew more than I did. He had been in this world far longer than I had, and if he said we had to wait, then waiting was our only option. But as the hours ticked by, I could feel the tension building. I couldn't shake the sense that the walls were closing in. Every phone call, every email, every interaction seemed loaded with a hidden meaning, and I began to question the people around me. Was there someone else in the office I could trust? Or was I just as trapped as Ethan? That night, I went home, but sleep didn't come easily. My mind was too full of questions, too many unknowns pressing against me. I thought about the message I had received earlier in the week, the one that said I was being watched. It had to mean something. But who was watching me? And why? Was it really just the people after Ethan? Or was there something more to this whole situation than I realized? The next morning, I returned to the office, determined to make sense of everything. I couldn't just sit around and wait anymore. I needed answers. As I entered the building, I felt that familiar knot of unease settle in my stomach. The usual busy buzz of activity in the lobby seemed muted, like the entire building was holding its breath. I didn't like the feeling. I made my way to the elevator, my thoughts racing. When the doors opened on my floor, I was almost immediately greeted by one of the senior managers, a man named James who had been with Ethan's company for years. He was always polite, but there was something in his eyes today, something guarded. "Good morning, Emily," he said, his voice tight. "Everything all right?" I hesitated for a moment, but then decided to press him. "James, have you noticed anything strange lately? Anything unusual happening around here?" He stiffened slightly, clearly taken aback by my question. He glanced around quickly, making sure no one else was nearby, before leaning in a little. "You have to be careful," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "There's more going on than you know." I felt a chill run down my spine, but before I could press further, he straightened up, his usual professional mask falling back into place. "I have to go," he said, his tone now businesslike. "But stay sharp." With that, he walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway, my mind reeling. What was he trying to warn me about? I didn't have time to dwell on it. I needed to find Ethan. I found him in his office, his back to me as he looked out the window, as usual. But there was something different about him today. He seemed unsettled. "Ethan?" I asked cautiously. He turned, his eyes dark with the weight of something unspoken. "I'm glad you're here," he said, his voice low. "It's starting. The first move has been made." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? What's happening?" Ethan stepped forward, his gaze never leaving mine. "It's time," he said, his voice steely. "The people who are after us, they're closer than we thought. We need to act, and we need to do it now." My mind raced. "What do we do?" I asked, feeling more lost than ever. Ethan reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the desk toward me. "You're going to help me stop them," he said, his eyes hard with determination. "Everything you've done so far, this project, your work, it's all been leading to this." I opened the folder, but before I could read any of the contents, Ethan's phone rang. His eyes flickered to the screen, and I could see the brief flash of tension that crossed his face. "I have to take this," he said, standing and walking toward the door. "Stay here, don't go anywhere." As he walked out of the office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Something was happening, and it felt like we were running out of time. I stared at the folder in front of me, knowing that whatever was inside would change everything. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized, whatever choice I made next, I was already in too deep to turn back. I was already part of something much bigger than I had ever imagined, and there was no way to escape it now. I stared at the folder in front of me, the weight of Ethan's words pressing down on my chest. "Everything you've done so far, this project, your work, it's all been leading to this." I opened the folder slowly, my hands trembling. Inside were pages of documents, notes, and files, everything Ethan had been working on behind the scenes. My eyes scanned through them, trying to absorb the information, but it all seemed like a tangled mess of names, dates, and numbers that didn't make sense. There were references to high-level meetings, secret transactions, and people I didn't recognize. But one name caught my eye, Judge A. Mitchell. I didn't know who this person was, but something about it made my stomach turn. The rest of the files seemed to confirm everything Ethan had said. We were running out of time, and the people after us were closing in faster than we could prepare. I couldn't ignore the reality anymore. Ethan had warned me, and now it was clear there was no way out. I was too deep into this, too involved to walk away. The more I read, the more I realized how much of Ethan's world was shrouded in secrecy. The power, the influence, the games being played, it was all too much to process. The sound of Ethan's footsteps brought me back to the present, and I quickly closed the folder. He entered the room with a grim expression, his eyes locking onto mine. "Did you go through the files?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "And?" he pressed, his voice low. "It's a lot," I managed to say, my voice shaky. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He walked over to the desk, looking at the folder I had. "Just closed. It's the beginning of the end," he said quietly, more to himself than to me. "We're running out of time. They'll be here soon, and when they do, we'll have to be ready." His words were like a punch to the gut. I had no idea what was coming, but the fear was palpable. "How do we stop them?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan turned to face me, his expression hardening. "We don't," he said. "Not directly. We have to outsmart them. We need to stay one step ahead, and that means making difficult choices." My head was spinning. How could I possibly help him do that? I was just a small-town girl who had been thrown into a world I didn't understand. But here I was, caught in the middle of it, and there was no turning back. "What's the plan?" I asked, feeling a sense of dread creeping up my spine. Ethan walked over to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "The plan is to expose them. We have to get the information we have out to the right people before they can make their move. But it's going to take time, and we don't have much of that left." I felt a wave of nausea rise in my stomach. "And what if we fail?" I asked, my voice trembling. Ethan turned around slowly, his eyes cold and calculating. "Failure isn't an option," he said. "But if it happens, we'll have to disappear. They won't stop until they find us." The weight of his words hit me hard. Disappear? I couldn't even fathom that possibility. I was already in too deep, and now Ethan was telling me that I had to risk everything to stop these people. I wanted to scream, to run, but deep down, I knew there was no escape. I was already part of this, whether I liked it or not. "How do we expose them?" I asked, trying to focus on the next step. Ethan's expression softened for a moment, but it was brief. "We have to find a way to get the right people the proof they need. Someone they trust. Someone who can get the information into the right hands without tipping off the ones who are hunting us." I nodded, though I had no idea how we were going to do that. "You're going to have to trust me, Emily," Ethan said, his voice low and serious. "This is going to be harder than anything you've done before. And once we start, there's no turning back. You can't back out now." I swallowed hard, feeling a lump in my throat. I didn't want to be in this situation. I didn't want any of this. But I had already made my choice when I decided to trust Ethan. I had come this far, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me now. Whatever happened next, I was in it. I was in it for good.